Wachowski,
Oh, present. Didn't hear you.
Commissioner Kimsey,
Present.
and Chair Sovereign,
Here.
and Commissioner Champion is absent.
Well, we're
And-
taking roll. Brian, could you speak to the status of our commissioner that is absent? I know she's been ill for a while. Is she doing okay or?
Have you seen the article about her here in the weekly?
Oh, no.
I just picked up a copy of the weekly today, but I haven't read it yet. But I will say, we talked to her. I thought she was going to be attending this meeting today, so I'm not sure if she'll be running late or if she's not attending. So we'll have to follow up, and I'll follow up with Chair Sovereign after the meeting too.
Oh, I didn't see that. It's nice.
According to the article, she's now cancer-free, which is
Great news.
great news. According to the article, again, she was stage 4 with small cell lung cancer, which killed my sister at that period with more than 10 years ago. That was a lethal situation, but apparently she's cancer-free. So I don't know how do we approach her about
Let's talk.
attending? She never had.
She was here for,
Here once or twice.
Sorry.
yeah, we can discuss it after the meeting too. We'll discuss more on the next steps.
I do just want to share information on participating in this meeting and providing public comment, including remotely by Zoom or telephone, is on this meeting's agenda, which is online at isearchmonterey.org. Remote commenters will be muted until it is their turn to speak, and a timer will be shown on the screen. If you are connected on Zoom, the timer is accurate with no delay. Thank you for participating in your city government.
Sorry, I missed. Oh, approval of the minutes.
I have one correction. The last sentence, I think it was just a little typo, but it says Chair Tim Thomas. Actually, the chair was Mike Sovereign. And unless anybody else has a problem, I recommend approval of the minutes.
I have a question, which Francesca and I were discussing very briefly there. In the October meeting minutes, I appointed a small committee, including Champion, you and me, to compare what services we're providing post-COVID versus pre-COVID. And we had and asked the report by the December meeting. December meeting, we do have an oral report, which I see no trace of in the minutes.
Yes. Commissioner Sovereign, you're correct that I can go back and add that you had distributed notes from your subcommittee meeting. So it will say that Chair Sovereign distributed notes from the subcommittee meeting at the
Thank you.
December meeting.
That satisfies me. Any other comments on the minute? Okay. Approved?
A second. There's still need, oh, okay. And then there's nobody opposed, everybody approves? Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. General public comments. I guess, Dennis, you might qualify as general public, but maybe not. Specific public. All right,
And there are no commenters on that.
nothing online. Okay. the public appearance items, discuss the Colton Hall rehabilitation. Brian, I'm sure you have some thoughts.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Sovereign. So want to bring this up in terms of if you haven't looked at the report yet, essentially what it is that the council resolution approved $158,000, and that was a project that was recommended by one of our museum commissioners in the past. And that was Chair Kimber Peak, and she had put in, and there was multiple projects in the past regarding the repointing of Colton Hall. And currently there's still $140,954 allocated in there. What this is regarding is that on Colton Hall in the around 1973, they completed work on restoration of Colton Hall that included things like cementing in chimneys, reviewing on the taking off the historic plaster. It used to have a like a pink color, light pink color. That's why you'll see the red in Colton Hall right behind you on the painting behind you. It actually was a pink color in years back, but the Colton Hall right there in the center is red. But it was a light pink, and you'll see it on different postcards out there at the time. And we have samples of that in our archive as well. But when they kept it with the exposed stone, and that exposed stone had some kind of treatment on it for a little bit for water treatment at that time. But with increased rains, and being now that we are 52 years later, the Portland cement that comes in there when the water soaks in from rain into the stone and into the mortar, something expands. The mortar, whatever stronger expands and can crack. So you will see on different sides of the building that the mortar basically expands and cracks the stone. So there's a number of stones all around that have been cracked. So there's part of it. There was a repointing project about repointing the area with a different type of lime, basically, what's called a natural hydraulic lime, and NHL mortar, which was what Architectural Resources Group had recommended that we use for areas. And this repointing would be on specific areas where there's needs. It wouldn't be repointing the entire building. There's also nails that are inside the stone, and there's nails inside of the mortar. And I think some of that, going in different research and reports, some of it may have been done in 1973. Some of it may have been done in earlier times when they did plastering of the building. So with that, last year I had actually applied for a National Park Service grant, did not receive it. It was a very competitive grant, and it was something where I was looking at getting one-to-one matching funds, because using the funds that were available currently in the NCIP project, which have been approved and there are funding, and then adding additional funds that would help fund additional climate review of the site. What you'll notice here, we can hear that rain outside, the slope of the building, right? So if you look at the slope of where Dutra Street is, Dutra is at a higher slope. And so we have a slope here. So the rain comes in, and also you need what's considered like a French drain so that the water comes in and goes underneath and outside the building. Part of the other piece is that over time, if you look at Colton Hall initially, a lot of the older photos, it's on dirt, and there's a platform around it. But over time, we've added brick walkways, and the brick goes directly up to multiple sides of the building. Some sides of the building, like on the back rear entrance of the building, there is a French drain there, and that allows when the water comes down to go into the drain. But on the side and in the front of the building, when water comes off of the side, it bounces back, and the water bounces back off of the building, and the rain bounces back and then on that grout there. So essentially, I'm just saying it's a larger project than what I believe the NCIP has accounted for, because I feel that we need to address things on the long-standing issues. So if you repoint the building with a softer lime mortar, you're going to get still more rain coming in there because of we need something for better drainage around leading up to the building. There's what they call a breathing, which would be like a grate or something that would be for the brick right up to the side of the building. and that allows for the water to drain through to go into the park. So that could also be, done by landscaping, and there's other pieces that can be done on there. So with that, I'm looking at, there's a number of reports, and Dennis has shared with me, we've done a number of reports through ARG over time at Architectural Resources Group in terms of the stone condition. And one of the things that's out there, and I just want to bring this idea out there, is it safer to replaster the building? And I know that's going to be, some people do not like the look of the plaster. I mean, that's what they chose in 1973, but over time, when they first made the building, it was plastered and replastered, maybe replastered, repainted every 10 to 15 years. But in 1973, they decided to take that all off, leave it with the exposed stone. And that exposed stone is very, very fragile and brittle. So over time, if we get heavier and heavier storms, and as we hear the wind and the storms coming up right now, it's going to damage, and you're going to can see considerable flaking of the stone there on the building and lead to permanent damage of Colton Hall. So with that, I guess my feedback is looking from the commission on whether we go forward with another grant application for climate resilience and then add that into the NCIP project, or do we ask for another project? And do we look at things like recommending, because I imagine if we were to look at plastering the buildings, it would be something talking with Historic Preservation Commission as well. So that would be a future discussion, but in the long term, what is the safest treatment for that exterior stone? Because like I say, it's so soft that you see people carve their name in cursive. Like you can't carve your name in cursive in granite, like the way that people have done there. And we have 1854, someone that signed their name in cursive right on the side of the building. But with that, happy to answer any questions. And Dennis is here also. If there's any, one of us probably could follow up with some more. If Dennis, you have any other thoughts on it?
Well, maybe on the history of this project.
Yeah.
Continuing.
Yeah. And I will say over time, there was, I think there was there's been, is from what I saw from engineering, I think there's been like 3 different project proposals over time for the repointing. And I just going back to it, I really think that if we just do the repointing, there's still a larger issue at play. And one of the larger issues is the drainage of the building, and dealing with the increased water on here of how do you treat, once you install that how do you treat the exterior of the building? Do you replaster it? Do you put on something regarding a coating that's going to help preserve that look of that building right there? And also just to make sure that we have enough funds in the project, because right now of $140,000, I imagine that that's going to go pretty quick in terms of like the amount of area that we're going to be able to solve with this.
Do you have any idea how much it would cost to follow the ARG report? Any estimate?
Part of the report.
I'm sorry?
Just
Which part of the report? Seems to me there are several pieces to this. First, I think the drainage issue needs to be solved because that's contributing to the deterioration of whatever we put on the lowest 3 feet at least. Because my parents' home was an adobe house, and even though it had 3-foot overhangs all around, with a brick walkway around it, there was still splash damage over time to the bricks, even though they contained emulsified asphalt. So that in effect, they were waterproof, but over time, with the water coming down and splashing, it eats away.
And as an add, Bill, I forgot to, Commissioner Wachowski, one item that I forgot to mention also is the wood. And one thing, the other piece that I'm concerned about is the wood trim. So if you walk around Colton Hall, you'll see that it's exposed wood. In 1973, also what they did is, if you look at historic paintings or historic photographs, which are in a black and white, but you'll see that the wood trim, the casing is painted. And they took off the paint and they've left exposed wood. So if you go around there and you think about like having a fence, but we have exposed wood, Or, and overall, many of the, not all of them, but many of the windows have exposed wood because they used to be plastered and then painted. And it was part of the overall look. And that has been exposed over time to give it a weathered kind of appearance and how it looks like. And over time, it's going to lead to further damage, and replacing casework on historic wood is going to be extremely difficult as well. So I don't have a cost for that, because I do think that, we brought in a consultant, or I'd say we as in the city brought in a consultant. I didn't get an estimated cost, but it was, they were just kind of highlighted specific areas that I believe they could do with that remaining funds. And it's still a small area, but I just mean, like, as Commissioner Evans is mentioning, that if there are 140,000, we may be able to do some of the specific small elements of just repointing some areas that have cracked stone, like current cracked stone. But that doesn't solve us in 10 years from now when the stones adjacent to it start to crack as well, and the other things, the other splashback leads to more problems.
Are we not allowed to use gutters because it's historic, to take the water away from the building?
There are gutters. It's just that, and some of the gutters are there. It's just that, if the rain doesn't always fall straight down, it's going to come in how it hits in different areas, north, east, southwest, depending on where the rain's coming from. So there are gutters, and the gutters are pointed away. There are some that I just walked around the building yesterday. There are a couple that, where the drains can possibly be moved slightly, but it's still like there are gutters at the building.
There are gutters, okay.
I'd like to compliment you on the effort to look into this, and Dennis before, and they have some funding lined up. But it strikes me that we shouldn't have to have this level of talent dealing with what is a basic maintenance problem. The city building, this is the oldest probably city building that we still have. The city ought to be monitoring it and putting city funds into maintaining the building for a permanent life.
I'll just add on this. I think that the people that need to be in charge of dealing with this, because this is a very unique structure in terms of the composition of the stone, everything related to it. So having, our building maintenance team do kind of come in when we need things, but it's not at the same level, I would say, as like bringing in a historic, somebody who works specifically with historic structures needs to, if we're dealing with a piece of wood, there's a specific process for, this piece of wood is rotted out. How do you cut out an exact piece of wood to really fit it in there? There's a lot that needs to happen in terms of treatment, of historic properties and treatments of a building to this nature, that people, because the person that in Public Works might be going in and they're going to deal with the gutters or deal with the flagpole or something like that. But at the same time, now they're going to public safety building, and then they're going over to, the wharf, and then they're traveling all around and doing different sites. So I think that's why we've had a number of historic studies done about like treatment processes and what's the right chemical components of the stone, what's the chemical components of everything there. And I feel like, part of it is it's going to be having a project manager that really has worked with historic properties, so somebody with that. So that's why I think like having if we went for a grant, I think the grant would be involved somebody that could help us project manage this, that knows how to deal with the stone, the wood, all of these different components, because there's different standards, I think, with how people did work today versus 175 years ago. That's in my opinion on that.
Excuse me. I agree that we need specialists. When they restored San Carlos Cathedral, they found out that they had applied the wrong material over the exterior of the stone, and it was accelerating the deterioration as opposed to protecting it. So it'd be critical to find out what what is the current thinking on the best product to put on the stone? But then as a related to the funding, could the city not pay for that? Or do we need to go out and look for a grant?
I'll say that, the capital improvement project budget, if you've seen this is something that's been discussed pretty regularly at council meetings in terms of the overall needs of how many projects are out there that need funding and that they don't have enough funding for capital projects right now. And so that's where this project has gone over multiple times through NCIP as just like an improvement project. And that's where there is an option. And that's where I think if there's not capital CIP project funding, is there NCIP project funding, and what would that be? So is there something, and that's where I think for me, that's where I'm coming to the commission to say, number one, should I be addressing your recommendation of this for the building of looking at a national grant? Because the National Park Service with the Save America's Treasures, that's the grant I was looking at before. And that, like, as I mentioned, that's a 1-to-1 grant. But is there also funding? Is this something that larger restoration of anything at Colton Hall? Is this something that commissioner would be interested in bringing to an NCIP project? So those are the two pieces that I'm thinking of.
I would think, though, that the building has not just an interest, it's Monterey history, but California history
Yes.
itself. So I think that the National Trust, is that what you said? I think would be a good place to go.
National Park Service is the
That's
one.
Park Service, yeah.
Yeah, so National Trust for Historic Preservation, and I'll talk, and I can mention that as well for right now, because Commissioner Wachowski had asked me about that for the next item. But what I will say is that they have specific grants that are available right now, National Trust for Historic Preservation, and this didn't fit into any of the criteria for the current grants that they had. And the one grant that they do have, which is open funding, is limited to $2,500 to $5,000 per project. And so it's a pretty small amount that we would be able to get for something like that. And so I think that it is something, we to continue to look for. And as the state, because it has a lot of importance for the state, but state grants related to this, I haven't really found anything that's been specific to this for this building that I would be able to apply for yet. But I continue to look for them. And that's why I think that Save America's Treasures would be the best, because if you're looking at it to me, the climate resilience component of it fits with what they're trying to do as well, where you're basically saying, we're not just trying to restore a building, we're finding new issues from the climate that are affecting this building right now.
I just wonder though, Brian, besides ARG, is there expertise at the state parks level or at the National Trust level, just on the recommendations on how to proceed with restoring Colton Hall for the long term? Do they have expertise that they can review the ARG reports and give us their best advice?
I'll just say the state parks are very limited in terms of their staffing and what their ability to do work is going to be, because they're focusing on their buildings at this time on, for example, they're going to follow the National Secretary of Interior's guidelines, same as we would for national sites. So we've worked with them in terms of recommendations for treatment of the floors recently inside of Colton Hall. So we have conversations with them on that. And as for sites like, the next item, I'll talk briefly about that, about the tile. And we talked with them specifically about that, but they don't have sites that they work with directly on that. Typically what they'll go out and they have district offices and historians and basically a lot more folks on site that look, and they're very specific on how they deal with things. Like if they're going to use redwood, they want to use redwood that's 200 years old, right? They want to use something that's very, that's the same kind of product as what they have on here. So this would be something that, we pay for these studies from ARG to do samples and to go through and reports on how to treat these kind of things. So I imagine if state parks would do it, they they basically are the same thing. They're going to go out for bids. They're going to have, they're going to have a specialist come out and give them a report. And then they're going to go out for contract to actually do the work. So if we were to do that, I would imagine we would probably, at a certain level, we then need to hire them, you know, to do the actual work to do it. But I just mean the capacity for them is, they don't really have the capacity to oversee some of our projects or our workload.
So what sort of decisions do you need? It seems to me that there are three levels of repair. One is French drains around the building. 2 is repointing, and 3 is replastering. Do you want to break it down that way, or
I guess, I think for number one, what I'm interested in is this something outside of what the commission has agreed upon or kind of worked on before in terms of the prior NCIP report, a prior NCIP report that said that, like, we need to do this repointing. Is the commission in agreement that we should be going forward with additional work on climate resiliency of the building? And so whether that's a treatment of the exterior and figuring out with whether that is a plaster or a coating of some sort for the stone, as you mentioned, Commissioner Evans, drainage as well as the repointing. Is that all in alignment with that? And then I think from there, we look at if we're in alignment that we should be looking at this for Colton Hall for stability of the building, where should we look for funding? And I think that's where in the past, commissioners have applied for projects for Colton Hall, whether that's, looking at, I believe the ADA, was the ADA project through NCIP, I believe.
Yes.
The lift at the back of Colton Hall, the ADA lift was part of that. And then this, the current repointing project is on there. So I'm just looking at.
So the current repointing, or the repointing, is what the 145 or 150 grand
Mhm.
that was approved to do repointing.
Yes, that funding is there right now.
But in order to protect that repointing, we probably need drainage, and we need maybe at least a coating, if not plastering.
Right.
Seems to me replastering is sort of beyond the beyond. I don't know. I've only been here since 1980, so I don't know what it looked like when I guess I do. I was here long before that, but never really was terribly interested in Colton Hall, at least the outside of it, as a visitor. But what do we know about replastering? You talked about replastering every 10 or 15 years. Are we going to commit, or if we recoat it with some sort of waterproofing, how often does that have to be redone? Obviously, we haven't done anything in a long, long time, but what's really going to get us on the path to preservation?
And I think that's where I think the last study that was done in 2015, it was regarding the stonework. They discussed the absorbency of the water, like how well that did. So I think that would be working with, as Commissioner O'Neill mentioned, with the San Carlos Cathedral, is that we would want to look with somebody of, can they actually work on. And that's where I think the general piece about, like, the grant should be something about coating, and whether that is a coating for stone or whether that's a protective coating of some sort is what I would imagine. And then going forward, because either way it would have to go through, I imagine through, in my opinion, if it was a plaster, it would have to go through historic preservation or architectural review in terms of guidelines for this area, because it would be a major shift over past 50 years from what it's been. And I don't know how long does last, because if you look at, when this building was constructed in 1849 and the first drawings from 1858, you'll see that the stone is exposed on that San Jose newspaper article because the plaster has fallen off.
Mhm.
And, that's where you look at photos from the 1880s and plaster has come off. So that's the thing, if the plaster would start to come off of the stone. And that's why I don't know enough about it, but we'd have to get some specialist in there to say this kind of stone with this kind of coating needs this for something to adhere to protect it.
What seems to me, one of the missing pieces at this point is how far will the 158,000 go in today's market? In other words, can we do the repointing with 158,000, or is there going to be, could we also do the French drains, for instance?
I don't think we would be able to do the drains because it'd be tearing out. And I think, Dennis, you want to add anything on this?
Well, it's just that, in 2018, we decided, to go ahead with repointing one wall. And the idea was to do it in phases. So Public Works started, some specialist assistance, a repointing project, but then COVID came. And that ended the project, it ended all the projects. So that's where we left it. But the idea was to get proper drainage. I asked for an analysis of the drains. COVID came too, but all that was to take place. Now, you could have a phase project doing one wall at a time, which would be an amount for each section, or you get approval or with grant funds perhaps to have the whole thing, but it would be a phased project. And part of it would be the drainage, and part of it would be the repointing. And then there's the major problem of covering the stone. Do we cover stone? ARG had recommended plastering. I inquired about some kind of sealant, breathable, for the stone's sake, sealant. And at that time, there were some people who said it was possible, but I never had a final answer. So they may have developed products though that would, it would preserve the current look, the original 1849 look, which was the goal at the time that they took the plaster off, which resulted in some of these unfortunate conditions right now. So it would be, that would be something that needs to be investigated, but it would depend on, that's probably your last portion of it. You've brought this up, Bob, that it needs, the drainage definitely needs it, because that's one of the causes, that's one of the problems, but it's also the stone itself.
Sure.
It's a sorbent, it's a soft stone.
They don't call it chalk rock for nothing.
Yeah, or Carmel stone, we'll blame Carmel. So, that's some of the project work that we did, but didn't complete. So, as Brian well knows, and the commissioners know, now we're at a state where this problem hasn't gone away. It's not going to go away. Something has to be done. And I think what Brian is asking, okay, shall we go forward with remedying this, or at least preservation? It's more than a maintenance problem, it's a preservation problem. And stability problem. It's not your everyday maintenance at all, it's preservation. So you have an opportunity again. Some of you have been on the commission long enough to remember when we did the other work and the other studies of the stone. So this is opportunity for the commission to review what Brian has presented to you, and that that you would recommend that we go forward with it. Because if we don't go forward at some point, it's going to get worse.
We've spent a lot of time on this. Let me try to maybe summarize from the commission. Colton Hall is a unique asset the head of almost anything I can think of that Monterey has. And I think we ought to, we're derelict if we don't have a plan to keep this building going. Well, no. So I'm pretty sure that the commission would back such a plan. And all we can do is encourage you to continue to put this plan together.
Is a motion in order?
I don't think we need a motion. I don't think I need a motion, but I think there would be somebody, if somebody was going to commit to putting together the grant, I could be putting together the grant, but if somebody's going to be putting in a local, like an NCIP or other kind of project on there, we would need a commissioner similar to past commissioners who submitted something regarding climate resilience and protection. That would be one of the commissioners. in my
Don't
opinion.
we need to know how much money we're looking for before we start writing grants?
Well, we need to know what the scope of what the work is. We have to have the scope of what exactly we're going to be working on, and then we would get a rough estimate.
Apparently, the ARG report didn't lay all the steps out and the totality of restoring that building. So we may need something like that.
I will say, I have some of the maps, but as I mentioned on there, the ARG report is really focused right now on that. The 158 was focused on the highest need. Just only the latest report that we had on them was summary of existing conditions on there. And then they looked at, there's a number of reports. So for example, on here, selective repointing at the base of the east, north, and west walls with natural hydraulic lime, selective stone repair within the repointing area using an NHL-based patching material, and removal of ferrous, and those are the iron nails, embeds on the north elevation and stone repair with an NHL patching material. That's the extent of what they were saying would work with that current grant and that current funding was the last time we had a report. And it's really about, if you walk the exterior of the building, and then you walk really around the base, and you'll see those smaller stones that are all around the base, or you'll see cracks in them, vertical cracks. That's what they're looking at. It's really just on those ones. And so I'm thinking that part of this would be a study and an analysis, because there has to be a study and an analysis for as Dennis had just mentioned, about what is the current process 10 years later. What are we looking at for treatment of stone? Because other buildings and that's going back to, whether that's National Trust, whether that's National Park Service, and National Park Service sets the guidelines generally in terms of treatment of historic properties. What is the current treatment for stone for some kind of sealant on there? And we would go by their updated guidelines and have some kind of, hopefully a standard of what that would cost, but it would be for a whole exterior. Because if we're repointing, I'm just saying, if we're repointing a smaller portion of the building, I still think that in 10 years, we're going to come back and say, guess what? All of these other stones started to crack, or there's other pieces of the stone that are continuing to flake. And so I would like to say that we look at the drain as part of it, the overall sealant as the other kind of part in there, and include this as the funding that we already have on there as part of this project as well. I just think it's a larger scope than what we have scoped before based on prior reports. And as for funding, I'm not sure the amount right now. When I looked at funding when I was looking at applying for the grant last year, I thought that the funding would fund a report for just a 1-to-1 matching grant would fund a revised report of what to do on the facility regarding drainage, landscape, and not even maybe even complete all of the work. It would just help fund the reports necessary for doing this work, and expanded repointing. So expand repointing beyond what that additional scope was, but it did not include funding for overall stone treatment and protection.
That makes sense, gives us an idea of the totality of the project and what we should do in each part. And then we can go out and find the rest of the money to support that.
Mhm.
We need to protect the building because it's a one of a kind. And we're finding with these historic buildings, if you don't take care of them,
And we need a long-term solution.
Yeah.
I mean, we can't just be patching. We need a long-term solution.
Yeah.
And as Dennis said, there may be, it's been 10 or whatever, 12 years. Maybe there are other things than plaster that are cheaper and better as a sealant.
Or at least better.
Yeah.
So,
So as I understand it, then you're going to write a grant to fund a study. We're not actually writing a grant to provide more capital improvement money at this point.
Well, it's going to depend on what the capacity of that grant is. Because generally what you're looking at with the grant is what can they do with it? Community Foundation of Monterey County, like their impact grants for historic preservation are capped at $50,000 unless you get special approval on something else. And then we are also in the middle of a grant with them. So we can't apply for a grant until this current grant and interpretation has finished. So that's that one. The National Trust for, if there's Preserve America grants, they're going to have guidelines for specifically what we can and cannot apply for. So if we can, it's the part where it's the one-to-one matching funds, because I do find that I think doing some of the research, it would be great to have the grant that actually does the actual work, the actual coding, because I think having another study, I don't want to do another study and then 10 years we're coming back and somebody says, hey, we've got another study and
That's
another,
Exactly
Yeah.
where I was going. We don't
another.
want to study it to death. We want to start doing something.
But I think because we've had some of these studies, it gets us in a better place for competitive grants because we have studies on the stone, we have studies on the wood, we have reports on drainage, we have reports on work, we have examples of work that's been done, and we have some funding that's available. What I'm just saying though is 140,000, even at matching 1-to-1, I'm not sure if that's going to cover enough to fully coat or plaster or whatever it is going to be needed for the building. And so we need to have a plan in place for how much it's going to cost and what are we going to do with it.
So we're going to spend some of our 158,000 on another study.
Yeah, I think you always have to. I mean, that's what part of plan. Anytime you're working on any kind of architectural plan on any project, doesn't matter, if you're remodeling your kitchen or whatever, you have to have somebody come in and do a report and permit and this other kind of work. And because it's a historic building, somebody's going to have to come in and say, this is the work we're going to do. We're going to submit the plans. We're going to get permits. All of this work has to get done with permits and plans. So yes, a percentage of work always has to be done on an updated plan. So I will say, yes, there's going to be a certain amount for reports. Yes, because the reports, if they're 10 years old or 15 years old, they're going to be too old for that. But I think that'll be part of the grant project.
can we move on to item number 2?
well, we're agreeing.
Lab.
Are we simply agreeing or are we trying to shape it in any way or is what he's proposed?
I don't see anything in front of us at the moment that we can agree to.
Move forward. I think there's no doubt about that. I think we're all in agreement that we need to do something
Yeah.
and we need to do it now.
And apparently we need
The plan.
a grant to define what we're going to do.
Yeah, we need a long-term solution.
Yeah.
And we're not there yet, right?
We need a plan for a long-term solution.
Right.
I think, yeah, part of the issue I will say is to be clear is that there's the work could be, if somebody were to put in a proposal, the same way we've done for the ADA compliance or working on the repointing project on climate resilience as part of additional funding, whether that for an NCIP project, that would give us additional funding. And then if we had additional grant funding, that gives us more. So I'm just thinking there's additional multiple pots of money for us to complete something that could be a much larger project. Any historic preservation project can really balloon and cost very fast. So was the other part is if there's anyone
Now,
interested in working on a project the same way that was done by Chair Peak in the past.
you were talking about a one-to-one match on this planning grant, but can you spend money on planning? There's been a lot of discussion about how we spend NIP
Mhm.
has to be on capital things. And planning doesn't sound like capital to me.
So part of this, that grant was Save America's Treasure. So part of it was that it was a one-to-one matching grant, but it wasn't just for planning. It was essentially that a piece of that was to provide a report on climate action for that specific site. Because if you're going to remodel a lot of the areas on the outside, it's going to expend past $140,000. So part of it was to expand. It was a matching. If we had $158,000 from NCIP for repointing, it was to expand repointing. So some of the funding that I had applied for was to expand repointing. Some of it was for project manager costs. Some of it was for doing drainage work, but it was an additional kind of larger plan for the facility. So it's all pieces on there. It's multiple pieces on the action plan.
Okay.
Moving on to number 2. A plaque.
Yes, thank you. So this is the tile map that I had brought to your attention in the past. And this is the map that's representative of the De Trail to California or to Alta, California at that time. And so in the time we acquired it in 1935, there was a sculptor based out of San Francisco, Edgar Walter, that donated this tile map to City of Monterey as we were building the Few Memorial Complex. So the whole, when Agatha Few was donating their estate to build City Hall, they built this rose garden and they placed in the tile map inside there. I would say over time, the wall has continued to deteriorate. And we had back in 1999, people had started to say, we need to preserve this, but it hadn't been preserved. And so over time, the wall, it continued to, the water came through, I would say, and leaked through the wall, that same kind of Carmel stone, pushed the tile out this way, and then it fell down and crashed and damaged. So that tile map was made in a tile factory in Triana, Seville, Spain. And that factory is now turned into a boutique hotel, which has all of their old tiles all throughout their boutique hotel. But the map, I reached out, I emailed some tile manufacturers in Triana, Spain, because it's still kind of like it's a touristy kind of site now, to see if anyone still would make anything unique. No one responded to me. I then went to some shops around the area to see if anybody had any Talavera tiles, places in Mexico that would make this kind of make a unique tile. And I asked some staff to check with other kind of artists in the area if anybody would make it. I was able to reach out to there's a tile company in Berkeley. There's a tile store in Berkeley, and they recommended a tile artist that has done unique tile art in the area. And the quote that I received was under $8,000. I would say it's about, I forget the entire amount, but it's around $7,500 to do it. And that would be including installation on something. And I asked for basically in like a stainless steel mount, so that and included with drainage, so it would look like the existing style. Most tile is a 4-inch tile. That's a 5 by 5. I think it's 5.5 by 5.5 tile. So it's also a distinct size. Like most time you'll either buy a 4-inch tile or a 12-inch tile. So most tile shops that do individual tiles or recreations do them in a 4-inch style. So this is a 5.5. But the map was made on Pedro Font. He was the Franciscan friar that came up with De Anza up on the trail up to colonize Alta California. And they created a map, and he drew a map of the area. And it's one of the first maps of California. So that's what the map was there. And that's why when they made this as a replica of what a Spanish garden would have been, that's why they used that map, like as an example. So there's some examples in here from different photos, and you'll see missing tiles before it collapsed. And then the original map is from the John Carter Brown, is in the John Carter Brown Library, but it was also published in the different books on there. And there's a newspaper article in there about when it was first donated. I did connect with state parks to ask them if they have any ways of how they remake tile. And we walked through and looked at it. And what I found is that one of the staff there actually used to work at Hearst Castle, and Hearst Castle makes their own tiles, but they make it on their own molds. They still have the original molds over there. So if their tiles break, they have the colors and the tile molds and everything there, but they don't remake unique tiles. So if they're working with anything, they're going to work with their tile makers that have all of the existing samples and examples there. But with that, I'm asking for funding because I find that this map it's part of our art collection technically. And so it's would be part of a expenditure of adding in a new map. And I would like it to be installed by somebody that does that's a installer on this as well to work with this, because you'll still see in the photo on page 11, packet page 11, the frame is still there and needs to be kind of cleaned out, but that's where it just completely fell off. And, to get that cleaned off, installed, and I think it's representative of early Spanish Alta California, and I think it would be a great addition to have it back here. So with that, happy to answer any questions.
Is there anything near the tile map that explains it, just what you've done? Is there a plaque or anything that talks about it?
No, all is underneath it. You'll just see it. It says underneath is presented by Edgar Walter of February
below it.
19,
There's just a
1930.
little tiny,
Very
a little
tiny.
tiny plaque. It doesn't
And-
have any history on it or
Yeah.
anything.
And so what I'll say is I found out the history of this map I was actually chatting with Dennis. Sometimes I'll go in Dennis's office and we'll just meet and talk on different things. And I grabbed a book. I said, can I borrow this book on the De Anza Trail? Because somebody has just reached out to me. And I flipped through and I opened the book and I said, that's the map.
Huh.
That's the map right there. That's the map that fell off. And I had never found where that map was from.
Yeah.
And then I traced it back. And then it was because there was nothing that said we had the artist listed as Montalvan. That was what was listed in our records. Artist's record was Montalvan. Montalvan is the factory name. And so I had to do back research. So the thought was on there is that adding it in there and having where we have the app with like public art is adding in the information about it and the history on there
Yeah.
would be ideal, because we run into that about a lot of history of art pieces on here is not existing. So if you go to like the grizzly bears that are in front of Colton Hall, there's nothing in there about the artist. I think Chris Swanson, I believe the artist is. There's nothing regarding Chris Swanson made this in here or this was funded by this project. So that's where the app has been on there, because I find that throughout the city with a lot of our artwork.
I like this particularly if we can tie it to something like De Anza. It hasn't, by itself, it doesn't tell much story. But we have. I'm going to suggest later that we look into the city has reinstituted the program that they had pre-COVID for giving grants to nonprofits for historic or cultural events. We used one of those for the Bouchard, and that was a big help towards that. Maybe we could think of how to incorporate bringing back this map as part of the in 2 more years, we'll be up on a good repeat year of the Enzas. 76. In 26. So I could see using this as a key. The only thing that worries me is that wall is just like the Colton Hall, only this is even worse. It'll eventually throw this off, and
Are you suggesting that we change the map and do something different? Is that what I'm a little confused.
no, I'm not
Okay,
changed the map. As that Brian was saying, is associated with the Enza.
well, sure.
You're saying explaining the map and in that explanation
Yeah.
include.
Well, you
the
do that
answer.
with an interpretive panel, like you go next
Yeah.
to it.
Well, I see doing a lot more. I mean, the Enza is again a one of a kind events that
Yeah.
people need to know more about. And
Right.
I think that could be one of our purposes in the next year.
So
What kind of timeline, Brian, are they talking about?
I didn't get a timeline on there. That's a great question. I mean, it's essentially, let me see what he said on there. Let me see if I can, let me see what he said. Let me see if I can find what I think. And, okay. Sorry for the. Sorry. Yeah. Okay, he didn't give me a timeline. He just gave me kind of the manufacturing
Okay,
and then what a galvanized metal frame, Durock backing, waterproof adhesive and grout, and frame drainage.
Yeah, I can see a cell phone tour there where it explains the history of the map. And then you go to another one that talks more what Mike is talking about, the De Anza
Right.
expedition that would explain all that. I mean, it would be difficult to put all that on the plaque, and I don't think the plaque should go on the wall for the reason you mentioned, but maybe a good cell phone tour of that could answer.
Yeah, cell phone web tour.
Yeah.
But basically you're asking for $10,000. We approved $10,000 at the last meeting for, what was the project?
The study. There was the study for the Pacific Biological
Oh, yeah,
Laboratories,
right.
and that's still, we're waiting for the cost estimates to come in from their subcontractor.
How many dollars do we have in the trust fund?
Yeah, that's something I can look up the amount just a moment. What's that? I can look up the amount. It's going to take me a moment. I believe when I looked before, I thought it was something around 140 to 150,000. But I can verify.
Growing.
No, this is it. This sits in a account with the, that's right. Thank you, Francesca. It's the interest, we don't see an interest account in that I see because it goes into, it's in a fund that the city, so that might be a question for the city finance department. The city might invest their funds, but that fund sits at a city account because it's sitting in a city account rather than in it's sitting in a special account fund rather than sitting in an account that gains interest that I see.
And is it replenished in any way?
From what I've seen on there, and I can pull the information later, some of it was done, I believe, when we auctioned off items from the Monterey Conference Center, when there was artwork that was auctioned off there. So deaccessioning artwork. So when there's artwork that's deaccessioned, it goes in there. Years back, the council would appropriate funding to go in there. The council has not appropriated funding into an art acquisition fund. So that would be the other kind of piece. So whether somebody the art acquisition fund would have to go either like a council appropriation of funding in there, or if we, as the commission, if there was artwork that we are deaccessioning that we auction off, that's where the funding would come back into there. And that's going to be,
Are we ready for a motion?
I'll move that we approve the 10,000.
Second. And Bob, would you accept the fact that further down the line that there be a cell phone explanation of that? That includes the history of the map and the De Anza, tie it in with De Anza.
And at some
And-
point in Colton Hall.
Yeah.
There should be an explanation of what this whole sort of complex is about, and that down there's a map and the jails next door and all those kind of things, so that people can, eventually I would like to see a digital display in Colton Hall that would do a lot of these things, including, of course, the history of Colton Hall and what goes on in there. The video, or at least a portion of the video of the
Constitutional Convention.
Constitutional Convention and so on and so forth. I mean, it should be a center for Monterey's history.
and I will say that that's part of the grant we have going with the Community Foundation. So that is something we've tasked some of our museum team on doing is actually buying the touchscreen panel. So that we're looking at it kind of like lower underneath where the displays is in the back of the museum. And so we will be working on something of that in the next, I'm hoping this coming calendar year is the hope that we could have something like that on there. But also that there are different partner organizations, and I have not seen grant funding from them regarding the De Anza Trail, because people have been highlighting, the De Anza Trail coming through, and because they did come through Monterey as well. And we do have a De Anza marker, over there at El Estero,
Mhm.
but then and the big granite stones there are the De Anza monument that's over there. But I think tying in, there's not a lot that I've seen regarding De Anza here in Monterey, even though there's a larger group. So there might be more coming up in the future with that. And also just to add, the other part for the last meeting also was asking for funding, and that was for the artifact, not the art acquisition fund. It was for the artifact acquisition fund. The artifact acquisition fund was for the Ricketts objects. So the Ricketts items, and those were the things that auction is ongoing. It has not closed. That closes in about 10 days. So if we get anything, we're going to be bidding on those within the next 10 days. So that was the funding that we approved at the commission approved at the last meeting.
I heard a motion.
Second.
And we have a vote of the motion.
We'll have to say all in favor.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Appears to be unanimous.
Unanimity.
The third item, as I see it, is the upcoming city fiscal procedures. And Brian, I think you have some message for us there.
Yeah, so essentially that we have our city budget meetings, our department revenue projections, and this is new position requests are due next Friday, February 14th. And as of right now, the revenue that we receive is basically items on merchandise sales and tours. So the cost of our tours pretty much we had updated our tour fee schedule. I don't know if all the commission recalls, but we went to council. We have our tour fee schedule goes through here, what we charge for Pacific Biological Labs and those items there, and larger groups, Colton Hall and everything for private tours. That's where we have on there like private tours. And we don't charge for education groups, and some of those kind of things are on there. So that's where our revenue, but the new positions on there, if there's any new positions requested going through there. And there's also just a kind of a 5-year calendar for, they're going to be working on 5-year projections. So like what's the average on here? And because COVID hit the museums quite hard as a staff, the first 2 years of the 5-year projections are very low in terms of like the staffing and like all of the budgets are there for those years. So going forward, we have our expenditure requests. That's what we're going to be working on, different projects, and that is going to be due at the end of the month. And next month, I'll be working on department budget meetings with that. And so just looking at any identified any things from the commission that I should be working on as we work on this. And part of that is, I know it's come up before in multiple conversations, is what's section 21-5 of the city code, which is regarding Colton Hall and the hours of Colton Hall. And Colton Halls on that section is stated to be open daily, with the exception of Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's Day is what it's stated on there. It doesn't state what hours, like the amount of hours, it just says daily, and that the hours will be decided in conjunction with the commission, that the staff works with the commission on that. I will note also that, so our current staffing right now, for what's actually funded directly, so Francesca's 25% of her staff, 25% of her time is through that. Brianna, who's our artifact specialist, she is currently part-time. And then we have 3 people right now who work hourly, as in two of them work to open our Colton Hall, because Colton Hall is staffed by museum attendants. And our third person is partially funded right now by grant and also funded by general fund. And he is working on updating the exhibits on Colton Hall and Old Jail as part of our grant with Community Foundation, as well as we're updating what we're going to be doing for our tours, for like information we give out during our tours to different students, and aligning that with social science standards from the school districts.
And how many hours a week does she work?
Does he work? I believe it's at 18. For our museum, we have 2 people that are museum attendants. One works Thursday, Friday, Saturday. The other one works Sunday. And those are basically 10 to 4. Those are 6-hour shifts. And the other one, I think, is 18 hours a week currently for our other, for that position is a artifact specialist. So we're essentially looking at, we have 18 hours of one, and then 24 hours for Colton Hall. We have for that, and those are hourly positions, non-benefited positions on there. And then for our artifact specialist, that is a 30-hour-a-week position.
30 hours.
Yeah, part-time. So altogether, it's we don't have a single one person that's a full-time position. And the city did approve in the last budget cycle a assistant library and museums director, and that position is currently under recruitment. And I will see what that position, how much that position will be involved here with the museums based on their background and their interest and their ability, because there's a lot of extra work that needs to be done. So yeah, I would say in the past there was a different staffing pre-COVID. And also I know that Chair Sovereign, I think also this also a moment to actually talk from anything recommendations coming from the ad hoc subcommittee regarding this. I will say that there are other museums. So the Presidio of Monterey Museum is staffed by volunteers, and Pacific Biological Laboratories, generally when we have the second Saturday tours, and the staff, it was second Saturday tours pre-COVID, but we only opened it second Saturday, and then private tours. So there's private tours and second Saturday tours, and those are done by staff as well as docents. So we have volunteer docents, but a staff is present when we do the Pacific Biological Laboratory tour. So that's kind of where our staff is at there. But if there's any projects that are upcoming or anything that we would like to, I mean, there's the cost, like some of the things like I know the commission has also brought up in the past multiple times concerts, and there are costs associated with having those in terms of hiring performers, you know, doing the work, and how do we get that in there? So I'd just like to hear your feedback so that I work on the budget. Happy to answer any questions.
Well, I would absolutely like to have the concerts brought back. I think they were a wonderful part of Colton Hall Entertainment. And, you know, I worked with that some in the past, and I would love to do that in the future as a whatever, volunteer committee, whatever.
Thank you.
So does that kind of activity fit in your assistant position that you've got proposed?
That's, I mean, typically I came here and I've learned a lot in my position in terms of learning from Dennis, and I appreciate having him here to continue to help me here because I have questions coming up, because I don't know the past with how much the library or museum director, how much involved in kind of day-to-day operations like I was, and how much the assistant library director would be involved in some of that, because I think I typically go through and, work on exhibits and work on grants. And I think the assistant library director might be working specifically on something like the budget or grants. I can see some of them helping out with some of that right there. But I'm not sure if that position would be working on, community outreach and working on the contract with a vendor and, choosing some of those things, because those were done by different classifications in the past. And I feel like there might be a different classification that would be ideal for doing the additional day-to-day work that has to happen to run a museum and to go through it. And that's why I feel like there might be a different classification needed, additional, my opinion.
So are you interested in proposing that other classification position?
I will see if I can negotiate that that'll be a part of the meetings with I'll be negotiating that with the city and the city team on that. But I think for me, I'm thinking of from the history of this commission, what other roles or other kind of work activities, something that's be there so I can find the right position and find the right project. So if I know, for example, we want to do 4 concert series a year, or do we want to do this kind of things right there? That helps us figure out how much staff time. Is that going to be part-time? Is that going to be is that part-time seasonal? Is that an hourly position, or is that a regular part-time, or is that a full-time position? I think some of those pieces help us figure out what exactly we should be requesting on our side. So understanding the workload, helps us figure out what are we going to propose.
Well, it sounds to me like we would certainly be interested in having that kind of classification so that we can get the concerts underway. Are there other kinds of things that we'd like to bring back that we haven't brought back? Or are there new things that we should be thinking about?
I, of course, am interested in events like this, that possibly something that's relating to the plaque and the.
So he's talking about some other kind of historical public event, which is what we did with Bouchard. I mean, we made costumes and recruited all kinds of volunteers and coordinated with the ship, and it was a lot of work on the part of a lot of people, but there was somebody basically coordinating. There What's Dennis's position at this point? Is he just a volunteer or is he on salary?
Staff.
Okay.
Dennis is on staff, and I will say is there's not a full-time museums and cultural arts manager funded at the time. So it is a limited time that we have available. But that's where, and Dennis works primarily for libraries right now. So Dennis is working with us on a lot of research projects that we have in California History Room. We still have a lot of people coming in, a lot of projects, backlog, archives, a lot
Yeah.
of work on there.
Training.
And training, yeah.
Or
Yeah.
history, like,
And that's right. We have a new local history librarian starting in 12 days. But knock on wood.
Perhaps Dennis could talk to us about some of that at one of our monthly meetings,
About
About what he's,
doing in the history room.
well,
Okay.
right now, I'm partly filling in for the local history librarian with California History Room, as well as I'm working on preserving some historical collections that have been unprocessed, especially since COVID and recent donations of archival material and really important ones. So I do various things.
it's, we will often get somebody like from a newspaper or a researcher, and somebody's working on a book and says, we would like historic photos of this topic, or I'm doing research on this topic. Can you provide information? And then those are generally filtered through Dennis. I'm often CC'd, or I'm often assisting as I can on projects like this for them. But things like, if there's a Public Records Act request that comes in on a project, it goes through libraries and museums. I handle those myself, and I go through Colton Hall records. I go through different records on there too. So it's looking for different files. So I'll say like special events and coordinator and those kind of things. I think having, funding, if we are going to fund a special event, and that's what I mean with even with the concerts, like there is a concert fund, and that's limited in terms of the amount, but having the special event fund the same way, because the event fund that comes through, there's the event fund that was restored, I believe, last year was the special event support program grant proposal. And that's funded through, I believe, Parks and Recreation. And so nonprofits are allowed to apply for grants, and they're doing it through the end of February. And a nonprofit group can apply for a grant for an event that will be free for the public. And so that's some of those things that could be funded if we're looking at like redoing the Bouchard Raid or Sloat Landing and some of these other things that have been done in the past. The museums department currently doesn't have like a project manager for that or funding. However, if there was a special event, like coordinator or somebody applying for that grant to apply to say, what are we going to do with this?
so
How many hours a week did Jordan work?
30. He worked first 20 and then 30. He was also,
Because it seems like we haven't replaced him. I mean, Jordan seemed to be your right-hand man, right-hand person on the museums, and he did the Buffalo Soldiers at the Presidio Museum. I don't know if I think under the current staffing, we're status quo. We're not doing things.
Well-
And whether that's a full-time position in a museum. I, along with the other commissioners, would like to bring back the candlelight concerts. The more we go with conventions and people coming, the conventions generally fill out the conference center Monday through Thursday or Monday through Friday. It would be nice to have Colton Hall open 7 days a week, and then to do some more of these special events that several of the commissioners have talked about. I don't know if that's a full-time person or another 30-hour-a-week person, but I think we need more staffing to do that stuff.
I'll argue that we're doing more than we were 2 to 3 years ago. And what I'll say with that is that the exhibit for Buffalo Soldiers, I worked on ordering all of those items. I worked on helping to assist. I hosted the program when we actually did the event and the opening. That was done in tandem. That wasn't done solely by one person. Our volunteers, we continue with our volunteers, and a lot of the work that I have Brianna working on right now, who has replaced Jordan on there, is based on the backlog of work that needs to be done. There's a backlog of having the stuff, as Dennis mentions about stuff in the California History Room too, is that we have, we have boxes and folders and files of stuff that hasn't been processed for years. And that's stuff that you as the commission don't see, but we are open more days a week here in Colton Hall than we were before. We are doing the same as we were before in terms of not pre-COVID, but once I started here. When I started here, we were open at Colton Hall 2 days a week. And I shifted that to 4 days a week consistently. And then we were open for a while, 4 days a week from May to September, right? We were open Colton Hall, and then I expanded that to 4 days a week. Here's why. So I'll say during that time with Jordan here, Francesca continues to coordinate all of our volunteers, which is a steady group of, we have to have, it takes time and it takes a lot of work to coordinate volunteers and to coordinate contracts and doing the work like repairing, doing the repair of art work that's on there. Brianna's been doing all of the inventory of all of our art that's in here, the collection of there. We're working on the app and historic information on there, cleaning of sites that are on there, working on the reports that were done. So I'd say since the 2019 or around 2020, I'd say at this point in time, we're doing more than we have in the past. And what you'll just see is that I think we had at the time another person coming to present what the daily activities were, what was going on there. And I find it better just to have like a general report of what's going on with our staffing. And we just need to figure out what kind of role is there. But, we've had some different, continue to have the events in Colton Hall, and we'll have to figure out what do we want to see moving forward.
Just cloned Francesca.
Yeah. And then,
Otherwise we're going to burn her out.
Yeah, it's there's just a lot of, I don't even know if I had my, I don't remember if my staff reports on here or not. I don't remember if one had. Either way, it would just be, we have to figure out, if we're going to be running, I guess, in my opinion, it's if we're going to be running special events, if we're going to be reviewing artwork or doing anything like that, that I just need somebody to do that kind of what you're seeing, because we're not doing the public facing, concert besides having people in playing music during Christmas in the Adobes or something like that. And, but there's possibilities out there. I think there's possibilities for us out there, and it's just what do we do and fund it at? And if there's something like, if there's special events, if the commission is saying we want to do one special event a year, or do we want to do 2 special events a year, and we want to have 4 concerts, to me, that helps me figure out what am I going to ask for? Because I find that that thing like the Bouchard, I think finding out whether that was $10,000 or $15,000 or something like that, because those things will cost us money, and figuring out what are we going to need in terms of a proposal.
So have you heard enough from us? Or do you want more detail?
Yeah, I think just in terms of was it, and I think from Chair Sovereign, you had mentioned the article on the Bouchard. Was it specifically you were looking at doing another Bouchard monument? Is it something we want to do? And we're at the 175th anniversary of California here in 2025. Are we looking at a special event or something like that you know, for example, did I propose it's like tied to July 7th or Bouchard or working with, I just want to know if there's anything that's the commission's looking for on that side.
Well, if it's a California anniversary, I think a bigger and better constitutional enactment might be in line. But I would certainly also pitch for the concerts again.
Okay.
And maybe we want to do, you know, in the past, they've been in the spring, but maybe we want to do them in the fall this time. I mean, it takes time to raise the money
Mhm.
and find the performers and so on and so forth. Maybe we're going to do 2 this year.
Right. And I will say I've been in contact with some local, I won't name them because we don't have a partnership in place yet, but about some symphonies and groups that might be able to come out and do programs with us as well, you know, for free. And I think those would be great. But I find because if the budget goes in July 1, I think fall would be great because of with the fall, then we have funding for this fall and in the spring for events.
Right.
That's what I would see. So that's where I would say, like, whether we do a series of concerts, special event tied to California history would be good. Okay.
So Brian, you mentioned that February is when you put in a request for special events money. Has that been done?
So that there is a if you look at the City of Monterey website, there is a special event program that's due, I believe, on February 28th, and we could check that. But that one is a special event fund that the Recreation Department does. So nonprofits could ask. So if there was a nonprofit group in the area that says, we would like to host a reenactment of this at this time, and because it would be free to the public, they could apply for that as a grant.
So the concerts would not fall in that category.
What's that?
The concerts at Colton Hall would not fall in that category.
My understanding is it's not, I mean, I could look at it, but my understanding it's for nonprofit groups and not for the city to apply for the other.
We applied to that program that as it existed pre-COVID and got money for this activity.
Was it through like a partner through, do you recall if it was?
It was completely volunteer led. You asking?
Like who actually applied? Did the city apply for this through the city funds, or was this?
No.
And I think, Mike, wasn't that done through the Old Monterey Foundation?
That's
and
what I
we
was
got
thinking
money
would have
from
been done.
Community Foundation? The Bouchard?
Well, there were 3 different funds. One was the Community Foundation. One was Old Monterey. But we also got money from the predecessor of the program that we're talking about.
We were
Yeah, so I'm just thinking that's where I was thinking, like, if the funding, like the staff can be involved in it, but I'm just saying that the funding source, like who's applying for it, should be as Commissioner Wachowski is mentioning, Old Monterey Foundation or another group is out there that's putting in the application for it. It's a partnership on there, but it's like working on it. But the funding of who applies for the funding for that piece, because the Lower Presidio Historic Park is also, we work with the Army. Our group, basically the museums, works on the permitting process, works with the Army on accessing anything going on in there. But from just in speaking with Dennis, I don't believe the Museums Commission or the museum staff put in the application for this grant that goes through recreation. It would have been a partner community foundation, would have been a partner agency that filed the grant, but we were a partner in terms of the project with it. So it's the process of who gets to apply for the grant is specific on the grant details, and you could look at that on their website for clarification or contact the recreation.
are we done with this?
Yes.
Let's
Yep.
try to move through the last couple here. Next is the possibility of changing our schedule. Instead of monthly, Brian has proposed 5, wait a minute, 6 per year. February, April, June, August, October, and December. And myself, I can't argue with the situation as it has been. The first version of this proposal had a reason for why there are fewer than 12 or 11, which was stated as, again, lack of staff. That reason for this has dropped off of the version that we have today. I would greatly appreciate a statement as to the reason. Otherwise, it seems to me the commission is being blamed for this without explanation.
Yeah, I don't know if it's accurate to say that all those meetings were canceled in 2024 due to a lack of quorum. I think some of them were,
Just
but I also think some of them were canceled just because there were no agenda items that that you needed a decision on. But I don't think that we had all those meetings canceled due to a lack of a quorum.
apologies how I wrote it. That was actually canceled in the months of January, February, April, June, July, and November. But I should have clarified with a semicolon. September was canceled due to a lack of quorum. Just September. In 2024, the other ones were
Oh,
canceled.
I'm sorry. You're saying only September.
Only September was.
Okay, I misread that. Okay.
Yeah, so it could be
Yeah.
clear.
Okay. Thank you for correcting me.
And it is staff related and business of like what's in the kind of in the code for like what business we have. Because if we're not approving, if there's a project coming up there, if there's a special project coming up, like a item like related to Colton Hall, for example, if we get into a role of having to work on an expanded project with Colton Hall, or if there's new artwork going to be installed within the city, yes, I think there's business in terms of like what business we want to work on with that. But we are operating at very minimal staffing. And as I mentioned before, we have 7 commissioners and we have, 6 staff members total. And that's including our part-time or on call, right? So we have more commissioners in terms of than staff. We just don't have the staff here at the workload of what kind of decisions have, need to be brought to the commission at that time from the staff level is what I see. And so with that, because I'm working on writing the agenda reports, publishing items, trying to get these into a timely manner. And like for me on my side, putting together agenda reports, it takes time to work on all these agenda reports to put them in there to have a discussion item. And I find that it's just, I frankly don't have all the time to do it either. And so I find that like, if we know that we had an every other month meeting, that we work on the agenda for that, and then we work on what we could best do with our time and what we can approve.
Again, I don't oppose the idea of cutting back. Following up on what Bill says, as you read that statement, it sounds like all of those were due to lack of quorum. And I hope we could rephrase that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that could be in the minutes in terms of that was, I could mark that it was that were canceled due to lack of business. I think that's what I would consider it as. And 6 were canceled due to lack of business. 1 was canceled due to lack of a quorum. and even or if they were canceled by the library and museums director.
Well, I'm happy not to go to more meetings, but on the other hand, I feel that I'm more out of the loop with fewer meetings, less frequent meetings. Whereas, and I think this is another reason that you need more staff to help keeping the commission up to date as to what's going on so that we can provide guidance and maybe a new idea once in a while to promote the city and its museums and cultural arts.
I had a similar thought in that if we can only meet 6 times a year because there's not enough staff, is that justification to the city that they need to increase the staff because they have a commission that can't do what they thought it was going to do?
Yeah, I mean, well, I'll say, you know, what are we going to be funded for? Or are we going to see an increase in next year's
Mm.
budget?
Mm.
And I don't know.
Yeah.
You know, and council had their priority meeting over at Schulze Park last week, I believe. And so that listed where they had some of their council priorities on there in terms of where different items are. And I haven't seen the listing on there, but I know they asked council members on what's most important to you, public safety, museums, library, parks and recreation, all of these kind of things. And so, and those are going to lead to kind of where we're going. So I find that we can continue to talk here about, the need for concerts or need for these other things, but that also has to transfer to commissioners talking with their representative about like, what do we want to see? And not sure, but I think I can continue to advocate for what we need on our side, and we'll see what happens. Yeah, and I think what I was looking at is this would be the calendar for this year. And as I mentioned, regarding Colton Hall, if we moved forward on any other project, or if somebody comes forward with another NCIP project that has been approved and that we have business related to that we could call a special meeting related to business that we need. But this would be for this year here in 2025, this would be what we would have for our regular schedule for this year.
I'll move that we have meetings on April the 3rd and June the 6th, and then we revisit the issue when we see the new budget.
I second that. I think that's a good approach.
6th or 5th? June 5th.
June 5, yeah, whatever's on here.
And I think it would be also helpful, Brian, just that if you review the tentative agenda with the chair before it's final. I mean, that's when I worked with the planning commission, the chair did that with the staff. I know the mayor meets with Hans and reviews the agenda. And if the commissioners have any comments, we can give them the mic, and then Mike can go over that with you. But just to see, so that the commission has some input into what the agenda is. Is there any concern or a problem with that?
No, I sent an email to the chair and I didn't hear back regarding what topics we were going to propose for it. And before it was published, I didn't hear back. So we can schedule a time regarding that, setting up a meeting, and that's fine. But this is, if there's other items that are up there that
If we do them less often, it ought to be more possible to coordinate better.
Saying we won't have a March meeting then?
Right, March or May. It would be April and June.
Visit it later time. I
Yes.
thought we're revisiting whether we're changing it or not at a later time, after we see the impact.
We could review it at the June. We could review it at the June
It's a
meeting.
June meeting. We should
Then
have
by
a
that
feeling.
time, I think the staff will have a better picture of what the staffing is proposed. We need a vote.
Yeah, so
I
it's,
expect we ought to vote on that.
Yeah.
We
Well-
have a amended motion.
yeah, we can bring it up to discussion and I think, yeah, we will look at, I don't have I don't have the date for the June. There's typically the budget is decided sometime in June because they want to do it, mid to late June, they always have to approve it, of course, before July. So there, at some point in June, because we're operating in the first
First Thursday.
Thursday, right? I'm not sure if it would be approved or discussed by that time, but I'm just putting this in there that we may bring it up to the June meeting, but I could work with the chair. I'm going to propose that we work with the chair on what
The
are we,
exact date
the
in
exact
June.
date for whether that's July or August of having a meeting on there. Why don't we just work on just having why not work on just canceling March and May and then we just do April, June and July. And then let me see what the date July would be, as long as it's not in July would be July 3rd. So I'm
So you want
have the discussion possibly on the July 3rd. So I'm just
to,
saying,
okay, that's fine.
July, is that going to be a good time for a meeting?
I don't know if people are going to be available.
Yeah,
So that's the other part. So we could bring it back
maybe
to,
the week after that. Or do you want to do it, the June meeting later in June? When you
Yeah.
think you have a pretty good hand.
I might know some of these things. I just don't know if it's
Okay.
going to be, I don't know if it's going to be approved by council, right? And so if we have the June
I
meeting,
think we
it's going
can
to be
change it if we
around
wanted to.
the
Attend.
timeline of the next
On here.
potential council meetings, June first, first and third week of the month as the, council meeting. So June 3rd, I think June 17th are going to be the potential council meetings around those days.
How about we make the motion to meet in April
Mhm.
and at a date in June to be decided at a future moment.
And the June meeting. What's that? Yeah, I don't think we need a motion. We're just approving I'm just gonna, because we have the ability to cancel the calendar. So I think it would just be the guidance right now that we'll cancel the March and May. And then as I'm working on the calendar, we'll reach out to commissioners for what their availability is in June and we'll work on the calendar for the June calendar. That works?
Yes.
Yeah. And then we'll revisit for the other meetings.
Finally, the report of activities by the director.
Yeah, so thank you. I just want to point out Christmas in the Adobes. I was very proud that we kept open on the second night because a number of our sites had closed down due to the storms in the area. And then thanks to our the volunteers and the staff that all kept it going. And I think it was a great evening that was had by over there.
I think there were commissioners as well as.
Oh,
staff
yes.
volunteers.
Well, you're volunteering your time too, but you were down there. Thank you. I saw you there too, Chair. So thank you. Yeah, that was great to have you there, greeting people as they came in. But I think on those nights, it was just a great event to have that many people come out again out there. So I appreciate everyone involved in that.
In the past, I believe that the commission has contributed in a number of ways, like decorating for Christmas. It's true that the what group
Rotary.
did most of it, but the commissioners, a number of commissioners helped decorate in the past. And I think if there used to be a document which outlined when commissioners could contribute to events like that. I'm not sure that that document still exists, or at least I don't know where it is.
That was another thing that was coordinated by staff in those days.
Mhm.
So again, the clone of Francesca
Mhm.
could easily do something like that. And I think the commissioners were eager to assist in that sort of thing.
Yeah, so I mean, July 4th and Christmas are two of the dates that we do decorations, and we typically, yeah, we've had the Rotary, I don't know how many years they've been out. 19, they've been coming out, so having, wreath making or something like that could be another possibility up there that we could work with the commission for later this year. The Monterey Angels, the replicas were hung, and I think they held up quite well. So I was happy about that. And we hung more than we've hung in any time in recent memory that I know of from looking at it, because we hung a number of them at Stanton Center as well. And one additional one went to State Parks because they were working on opening up the old whaling station. So that was a new building that they had opened again this year. So I think that was a good pilot. I do think it'd be good for us to look at in the future funding more replicas in terms of the ones that if you see them, and I'm happy to bring any commissioners want to schedule a time at some point to actually see them in person. I think it'd be good for you to see the actual real ones in person, just so that you're aware of the condition. There is one currently upstairs that's a really pretty good condition up at Colton Hall right now. But to see them, if you didn't see them during the actual, when we had them all on display in Colton Hall or at Stanton, to see them in person, because you can see the paint peeling, you can see the cracking, you can see the patching and repairs. And we need a long-term solution for that as well. The Colton Hall and Old Jail exhibits interpretations going strong, and I know Francesca, Brianna, and Jacob, who's our hourly artifact specialists, have been working on opening up one more jail cell, because what we're looking at is we're going to be using funding. We're going to be updating all the interpretive panels at the jail and opening up one more cell for interpretation, because there was basically 3 on the left that were displays, 3 on the right, and the ones on the right 2 were storage. So we're opening up one, or we'll have one more available for a review of some kind of interpretation on there. And I've been working with an intern from Middlebury, and she's just working on cleaning up a lot of content on the app and on the audio tour. So she's just been working on that for me. And Michael Hemp, who was from the History Company, he's written about Ocean View and the old Cannery Row. He came back down for bring back some Western Flyer artifacts, and we had it on a one-day display over there at the Pacific Biological Laboratories from the old objects from the Flying Bridge, like the steering wheel and the compass and everything. And then the Emil Norman panels that were first at Casa Munras, and then we're over at the conference center before the conference center remodel, are almost, they're getting close to being installed, and they're going to be on a loan with the Stanton Center. They were being stored in our garage, and they're now going to be on display, and the panels are going to be, the housing is done in the style of the Emil Norman's House in Big Sur. So the wood framing, but with like a LED backlit. So I'll let all of the commissioners know once we know when those will be installed in there. But I'm happy to see that. But if you've been into the Stanton Center recently, they did an exhibit on Steinbeck, and the next set is the Italian heritage. And then against the wall, they had a display case that used to have seashells in it. And on that display case along that wall on the first floor, there's going to be the Emil Norman panels on display. And then the display cases over by the MST bus and trolley stop next to Tyler and Franklin Street, we've cleaned those out, had them rekeyed, and the lights fixed, because the lights were all out. All of the lights were out. Two of the displays were probably from the 1980s, and they were from state parks and Monterey State Historic Parks. We dropped all of those items back off with them, and we placed angels in there. One right now is there are some like information on community museums, but there was things like Monterey Peninsula Museum of Art rather than Monterey Museum of Art. So there was older maps. We took down some other things that were really out of date, but there's still more that needs to be done. So we'll be working on updating those in the coming months as well. And I worked with Commissioner Thomas on the over at the JACL regarding moderating the talk with Enduring Democracy, the Monterey Petition. And thank you, Commissioner Thomas, for that opportunity to come out. And I think for folks that haven't seen the film, make sure you watch it and go visit the Japanese American Heritage Museum there. And our artifact specialist, Brianna, continues to work on cataloging, rehousing arts and artifacts. So there's a lot, as I mentioned, there's a lot of backlog of work that really, we want to make sure that all of these items are processed and found. Like, for example, I found a film, which I'm hoping comes back as what I think it is, but I found a 16 millimeter film, and it's hard to get 16 millimeter film processed. But it's, I believe it might be a film regarding the building of the original Monterey Conference Center. And it's a film listed as like from land to sea, the building of Monterey Conference Center. It's what's on the thing, but I have to get it processed and digitized. But it was a old film reel that we processed. And those are the kind of things that, because we have like the backlogs of stuff to get fined in there, that we need to work on. So that's great to work on. You'll see just the statistics in here in terms of the attendance at the museums and at our sites. And Colton Hall has been, I think it's been very steady, especially because of December and the tours in there. And looking back at old numbers back from 2019 of Presidio Monterey Museum, I think our numbers are actually pretty solid, because I was looking at old statistics from 2019 recently, and a lot of the months they were at 100 to 200 a month at the Presidio Monterey Museum. So opening that museum at some point, additional hours would be, I think, a great asset, but also adding some new audit items in there would also be great to do as well. But happy to answer any questions.
Commissioner comments?
Yeah.
Tim?
I have nothing.
Well, permission.
Well, I do hope that we can work on the music performances there
Mhm.
and move forward on that, working on some grants or even some fundraisers to help with the restoration of Colton Hall. I think that would be a wonderful thing, and I think people would come out for something like that. We certainly need the money.
Yep.
I think I've talked enough.
And then,
Given the situation in the city, I think a lot gets done. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think you're doing an amazing job with the small staff that you have, and if there's critical need for more staff, we're gonna do more than you're humanly possible to do.
Yeah.
It's amazing how much.
Yeah. Well, we look forward to serving and doing what we can to support our history.
Right? Adjourn.
Thank you.